CBS, America's #1 independent television network, presents the following sports exclusive.
And Bercovici again! Bercovici! Touchdown ASU! Roaches from the 24, takes a shot downfield, and caught for the touchdown! Watson, slam, Scott, fights Brandon Watson! Crossing around, it's Powell in the open field, and look out! He's even, he's leaving, touchdown! Off to the races, building, 72-yard touchdown! They set up the screen to Johnson. Johnson with blockers. Johnson down the sideline. Touchdown, Michigan. Howard keeps it. Green grass ahead. He is in for the touchdown.
Welcome to Basically a Football Show.
Basically a Football Show, Week 5 of the college football ranks, Week 4 in the National Football League. Kind of a stinker in the NFL. We're going to start with the college football ranks. I'm Zach, along with me is Greg. And Greg, there were several ranked matchups, some really entertaining games, and some upsets kind of reshaping the top of the rankings here in college football.
Yeah, a couple upsets that we actually predicted, I'd like to say. I mean, we're not the greatest with our NFL predictions. I'll be the first one to admit that. But we're pretty darn good with the college stuff. A couple I was kind of surprised by. I thought that the winning team would win, but not by the margin they won by. So a good week in college. The NFL, you're right, was not a whole lot to talk about.
We'll start with your #1 team in the land, the
Michigan Wolverines.
Buckeyes.
Oh, wait a minute.
The Ohio State Buckeyes, Greg. But they're really kind of being tenuous with that #1 spot. They survive another tight game in their first Big Ten game of the year. A tight one at Indiana, 34-27. Not too impressive for the Buckeyes here, just holding on to that #1 ranking.
Well, first off, thank God for Ezekiel Elliott. Because without him, they lose this game. It's that simple.
274 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 23 carries.
Indiana really hurt themselves with some bad clock management there on that final drive.
Yeah.
They let about 30 seconds run off the clock in between plays. They had timeouts to use, and they didn't use them. And I think that when you're a team like Indiana, who still they're 4-1, so maybe they're not that bad this year, but you can't play frantic football with a team with that talent level. You have to be able to get everybody calmed down and get everybody situated. And I think had they called the timeout, I think it was 3rd down, maybe 2nd, where they ran off a bunch of clock for no reason. And that rushed everything, and that hurt them, I think, in the long run. But the Buckeyes, I don't even know what to say about them at this point. They just don't look like the #1 team in the country. And if they were not #1 going into the season, they wouldn't be #1 today. It's as simple as that.
And Cardell Jones obviously played the majority of this game, 18-27, 245 and a TD. I thought we had all kind of seen that maybe they would give more to Barrett Jones as the JT Barrett, as the quarterbacks kind of struggled and the team struggled to find some offense. Were you kind of surprised that they went with Cardell for the majority of this game?
I can't believe he still got the starting job at this point because, first off, let's look at it. Cardell Jones last year, he played 3 games. He played 3 great games, no question about it.
3 biggest games of the year.
But let's think about it. Let's take a step back from how cool it was that he did all that and think about it. The 3 teams that he played had never seen him before. Yeah. Now you've got an entire offseason for teams to study film, go into the season, and he's just not played well. JT Barrett set Big Ten records last year on offense. I don't understand what the fascination with Jones is. I don't think he's ready for this job yet. And if they keep screwing around, they're going to end up getting knocked off one of these weeks. And I think it's time to make the change. I'm not knocking Cardell Jones. I just don't think he is I don't think he has as good a grasp of the offense and reading defenses as JT Barrett does. And that's just because he doesn't have the experience. But
do you think if Braxton Miller had decided to stay a quarterback, would he win the starting quarterback job?
I don't know.
The 3 of them?
I don't know, but he's another one that they're not utilizing. It sounds ridiculous to say, but I almost think this team has too many weapons on offense that they don't really know where to focus what, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because, against Virginia Tech, Braxton Miller was the guy. And then it's somebody else the following week, somebody else the following week. And, Zeke Elliott, again, without him, they lose this game. But they're a team that's kind of a mess right now, and I'm kind of surprised that Urban Meyer would let this happen because they really need to make some changes and shake some things up because they're just not playing good football. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to say that when you're 5-0 and ranked #1, but we've watched them all season, and they have not looked anything like the team that won the national championship last season.
No, they haven't. And this is almost a Florida State situation.
Right, exactly.
You were undefeated. You were the national champion. You were ranked number 1, and you're holding on to that spot because you're winning. Now, it's not nearly as impressive as it was, at least in Ohio State's case, to end the season. But they're pulling out the wins, and I guess that's what you say for them. But this is the same conversation we had about Florida State. I think Ohio State's better than Florida State was last year, but like you said, they have too many options and they almost don't know what to do with it. So they gotta pick a game plan and stick with it as they get deeper into their Big Ten schedule. One
other thing I wanted to bring up too is I think that the team itself seems like, and again, I have nothing to base this on other than just kind of a hunch or whatever. But I'm beginning to wonder if the team itself isn't going, why are we sticking with Cardell Jones? Why isn't JT Barrett in there? Why are they letting this go on? And I think you're starting to see it filter into the entire team now, where the defense is kind of like, why is it always on us? We shouldn't have to be fighting for our lives against Indiana, yet here we are. And I just wonder if they're not getting frustrated a little bit. It's just, it's a thing that needs to be fixed. And I think that had Michigan State played better, I think if Alabama hadn't gotten knocked off, I don't think the Buckeyes are number 1 at this point in the season, but they're kind of there by default right now.
Yeah. But I mean, saying with Ohio State struggles, give all the credit to Indiana. They played a hell of a football game.
Absolutely, yeah.
If Ohio State was any lesser than they were, Indiana wins that game.
I think if it's not for Zeke Elliott, Indiana wins that game.
Yeah,
he's just that good. But yeah, I really kind of hope that Indiana ends up winning 7 or 8 games this year, so this doesn't look as bad down the road as it looks right now. But I don't know what else to say about them. They're a team that they're just not firing on all cylinders, not even close at this point.
So the Buckeyes stay at number 1. We move down to the number 2 team in the country, who was Michigan State. And I say was, they didn't lose, but they survived against Purdue. They were up 21-0 at halftime, only got a field goal in the fourth quarter, as Purdue put up 21 points in the second half to get close, but Michigan State ultimately prevails 24-21 over Purdue, who Indiana at least was 4-0 going into the game against Ohio State. Purdue was 1-3.
Right.
Purdue's not a good football team.
No.
And at home, Michigan State struggled to hold on to a win against Purdue.
Yeah, this Michigan State team, again, I'm just wondering if this isn't a case of they just kind of were looking past these guys. Maybe they got a little bit of Ohio State-itis where they thought, hey, we're the number 2 ranked team in the country. We're playing a bad football team. We're going to show up and 38 points are going to magically appear on the scoreboard. And as Ohio State has proven all season, that doesn't happen. You still have to show up and play the games. So I'm going to give the Spartans a bit of a pass on this one. I don't know who they play next week, but I've got a sneaking suspicion it's probably someone better than Purdue.
Michigan State will be playing not someone better than Purdue. They're playing Rutgers.
Really?
At Rutgers.
Then I don't know what their problem is, but that's a game that they should have won easily, especially at home. And for them to have trouble with Purdue, that's just I don't know what to make. Honestly, with the college football season, I think I said it before we started, I don't think there's a truly dominant team this year. I think everybody is gettable at any point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of surprising because you looked at the way Ohio State finished last year and all the weapons they have. We just assumed that with all the power that they would be the elite team in college football. Again, they've won all the games, but not as impressively. Michigan State looked like a pretty good team, and going up against, trying to compare them against their Big Ten, companions in Ohio State, they looked better. The SEC, as we'll talk about, is kind of all over the place. Nobody has a quarterback in that conference.
Right.
You got Baylor and TCU who can score points like hell, but who are they playing and who are they going to beat when it comes to their own schedule? And on down the line, the Pac-12 is going to eat itself up.
It already has.
Exactly. There isn't that upper echelon of college football right now. There's several very, very good teams, but as we're in week 5, the elite of college football has yet to kind of separate itself from the pack.
That's what makes me wonder if there is an elite this year, which is kind of good for the game, I think, because
it makes it interesting. Yeah,
makes it much more interesting. I mean, as an Ohio State fan, I would rather not have all these close calls, but as an overall college football fan, I think it's good that there isn't one dominant team. So say if you're ranked, 8, 10, whatever, I was thinking about this when Arizona State beat UCLA on Saturday night, that if they can keep it together, you might see a 2-loss team get into the tournament this year just because it's just that kind of year.
Yeah.
So you're really not out of it. Even with 2 losses at this point, you still got hope. And I think that's a good thing for the game.
It's good for the overall competitiveness. I don't know if it's good overall because as we've seen in every sport, sometimes it's better when you have that big bad guy that you got to knock down.
Right.
And whereas we all have a shot. I mean, what happens if we're still kind of in this mess of I don't know who's good or not when it comes time to pick the playoff teams? And then there's like 7 teams that could all say, well, we deserve to be there. And then that kind of delegitimizes who actually makes the playoff and then who wins it.
And we've got mayhem again, and it's going to be crazy. But I don't know. Maybe things will straighten themselves out. We're at almost a halfway point. But I'm with you. I don't think anyone has really separated themselves. You know, you look at a couple teams and you go, well, yeah, you know, I think Alabama's still a force to be contended with despite the one loss. If Ohio State can straighten themselves out, they'll be okay. Michigan State should be okay. You know, a team I'm kind of interested in is Florida. I mean, they're playing pretty good football right now, but like you said, in the SEC, no one has a quarterback.
Right.
It's going to be a crazy season.
Well, let's talk about those Florida Gators as we move down to number 3. Ole Miss went into the swamp in Florida to play the Gators in their all orange uniforms.
Oh my goodness!
Orange helmets, orange jerseys, orange pants. It's something, but it powered them to something because Florida came out and just kicked the snot out of Ole Miss. 25-0 at half. They win the game 38-10. And again, we were talking about teams that look really good. We think Ole Miss is, after they knock off Alabama, that they're a pretty good football team maybe. And they jump all the way up to that number 3 spot, only to lose the very next week in a very emphatic fashion to Florida, 38-10. Now, Florida, their defense has been really good all season. The offense has been so-so. So this is kind of I think it's the score line is probably the most surprising thing. Not necessarily that Florida beat Ole Miss, because I think we were kind of on that saying that Florida has the potential to do that.
Right.
But not 38-10.
Yeah. I would have expected if for Florida to win this game, I could have seen a 24-17 win, maybe something along those lines, maybe even a lower score than that. But for them to curb stomp Ole Miss like this, but I was never that on board with Ole Miss to begin with. I mean, I think they're a good team. I never thought they were good enough to be ranked number 3, but I didn't expect this at all. I mean, Florida just had their way with them. It was just that simple. There's no other way to put it. It was never even close, which is kind of surprising.
I think this also, Florida is now 5-0, 3-0 in the SEC. I think this speaks to Jim McElwain, their new head coach. Obviously, Florida's been down because they haven't had the talent that Florida usually has, but you get a coach that's good enough, and we'll talk about that with some of the other teams that we've seen. A new coach comes in, and he just knows how to get the most out of his players, and especially defensively for Florida. And they're a cohesive unit. They're a good, solid team unit, and beating Ole Miss, it's good for them in the SEC. It's good for them in the rankings. Florida jumps up to number 11, by the way. Ole Miss drops all the way back down to number 14, probably more right. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the SEC plays out now that some of these teams are kind of beating up on each other. It's a problem we'll see in the Pac-12, but we kind of saw it at the beginning of last year too, when the Mississippi schools rose up and then they beat Alabama, they beat Auburn, and then everybody else starts beating everybody else. And then at the end of the day, oh, look, it's all reliable Alabama still on top.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out through the rest of the SEC schedule.
I just want to say real quick, I think that might be a bit of a too much of a jump for Florida to go from 25 to 11.
Yeah, they're not the 11th best team in the country.
Right. I mean,
they're a very well coached team. They're, like I said, they're a cohesive defensive unit, but 11th best team in the country? No.
We'll see as we go along, but I'm not sure I'm buying that ranking just yet.
No. The number 4 team was the TCU Horned Frogs, wearing an absolutely awful uniform combination. The purple chrome helmets with the gray frog skin jerseys and white pants.
Yeah.
Didn't look great.
Not at all.
But they didn't have to look great in the uniforms because they looked great in the field in a 50-7 beatdown of Texas. And with Michigan State kind of stumbling and Ole Miss losing, TCU jumps back up to number 2 in the country. And I honestly think that's probably right about now, that TCU would be the second best team.
Yeah. Their defense worries me, but
yeah,
but they held Texas to 7. I think Texas had scored some points on some teams this year, so that's maybe a good sign for the Horned Frogs. This is a team that can score points, and if they can put any kind of defense together, it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be decent. They're going to be really, really tough to beat. TCU.
Number 5 was the Baylor Bears, and they were taking on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Last week I called them something else. I think I called them the Rebels. I apologize, Texas Tech. You are the Red Raiders. But it doesn't matter. Baylor puts up as many points as they're always going to put up. It was 49-21 at halftime. 70 points combined in the first half by these two teams. And then they combined for 28 points in the second half. each scoring a touchdown in each of the quarters. Baylor wins 63-35.
They put up 28 points in the first quarter, and that was with Texas Tech scoring 14 in there.
Yeah.
My goodness, was that 42 points in the first quarter?
70 points in the first half.
Good Lord. I don't know.
The Big 12 does not like defense. It never has.
Not really, no. Not for a long time it hasn't liked defense. Not until probably going all the way back to the days when I think it was called the Big 8 or whatever. I don't even remember, but it's been a long time. But yeah, defense is not at a premium, or I guess it is at a premium in the Big 12. Jeez.
Baylor moves up from number 5 to number 3, right behind TCU.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's just the way.
Right. It's just the way things are falling right now.
With the rankings, and because the teams behind them, as we're going to talk about here now, the 6, 7, and 8, they all lost this week. As number 6 was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They went into Death Valley to play number 12 Clemson, part of their required ACC offerings. And Clemson got up big early. They were up 21-3 going into the fourth quarter. Everything looked like it was going well for Clemson. And then they kind of got a little conservative, and Notre Dame came back. They scored a touchdown. They were down 2 points. It looked like on that touchdown play they used up what was their best short yardage goal line play in that receiver rub. So it's, well, what are you going to do next? And then they do this kind of weird quarterback sweep to the right and don't even get close to the goal line. Get stuffed on the 2-point conversion. Clemson holds on for a 24-22 win. Something I was wrong on and Greg called. The Clemson Tigers beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
I just thought that Notre Dame, again, I'm not saying they're a bad football team because I don't think they are. They're, even in a year without a truly elite few teams, Notre Dame's still not, and I think at the top 10 level. And that's why I thought Clemson would knock them off. But Clemson almost Clemsoned this game away.
Very much did, yeah.
And I think that, I wouldn't get too excited about the Clemson Tigers yet. I called the upset, but I wouldn't dare pick. If these teams played 3 times, Notre Dame's going to win 2 of them.
I think so.
But
I think Notre Dame is better than Clemson.
I do too, but
just a lot of good circumstances, the rain, all that sort of the emotion.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame really impressed me by coming back the way they did because they were pretty much getting their butts kicked in this game. Mm-hmm. And they pulled it together and made it very, very close and a little bit nerve-wracking, I'm sure, for the Clemson Tiger fans. And if you're a Clemson fan, you've got to think, I don't care if you're up by 30. You're always going to wonder, are they going to Clemson this game away? And they almost did, but
I couldn't imagine being a Clemson football fan.
I couldn't either.
It just seems like such a tortured existence.
Exactly.
Like that, we'll talk about it when we preview next week's games. I'm afraid for Clemson next week, simply because of they have this big game against Notre Dame. They have to hold on late. And who do they play next week? They host Georgia Tech next week.
Yeah, this is okay. If you want me to make a real quick upset pick, I'm going to take the Yellow Jackets in that one. This is
Clemsoning, just waiting to happen.
Exactly.
Because Clemson, they move up to number 6 in the country now.
Oh,
Clemson's not the 6th best team in the country.
That's way overrated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But again, that's what happens when you beat the ranked teams and all that. But Clemson holds on. Notre Dame falls down to 15, maybe, right? I think Notre Dame's a borderline top 10 team. I think they're right there. They're 10, 11 by the end of the year.
Yeah, I would put them in that range. I just don't think they're a top 5 type team. Which believe me, if the voters can find a way to put Notre Dame in the top 5, they will use it. But I don't think they're bad. I just don't think they're quite good enough to be at the Alabama, Ohio State, TCU, Baylor level like that, or whoever comes out of the Pac-12, which can be anybody at this point.
Could be anybody. As we move on to the Pac-12, we move on to number 7, UCLA. Well, number 7, not so much longer. Arizona State came in, and they played like Arizona State should have played all damn year. They're up 15-10 at half. Arizona State scores 14 in the third quarter, so they're up 29-10 going into the fourth. And UCLA made a little bit of a comeback. They got to within, I think, about 2 points, or within 6, and then they get pinned down in their own end zone. And Greg and I actually texted with this one. I was watching it. It's like, did they just snap it out of the end zone on purpose?
Yep.
And sure enough, UCLA snapped it out of the end zone on purpose to give Arizona State the safety. Rather than punt from their own end zone, give Arizona State good field position, they said, well, we're only down by 8, then we can still score the touchdown, the 2-point conversion. I thought it was a dumb move. I see the reasoning, but it's just such high risk, low reward. Really.
Exactly. I felt the same way. I completely understand why they did it, but I never, ever, ever, ever give away points. I don't care. I know they were backed up, and I know that they're thinking we've got to get better field position to try to win this thing.
Trust your defense.
Trust your defense first off. Yeah, because that sends a hell of a message to your defense when you do that, and it showed on the next drive. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially that last ASU touchdown. Geez, that was hilarious, I thought.
That was great. So Arizona State, they get the ball back, and they make UCLA pay for the mistake. From about 20 yards out, Arizona State's running down the clock. They're up by 8. UCLA's used all their timeouts. They're simply just trying to get first downs. They give it to the running back. He runs into the pile. And he runs into the pile. And the pile keeps running. And the pile keeps running. And all of a sudden, he squirts on the other side of it. He's still holding on to the ball, but he's backpedaling as the rest of the pile is pushing forward with him into the end zone for the game-icing touchdown. Arizona State knocks off UCLA 38-23. Now there's a big jumble in the Pac-12 with all these 1-1 teams, as we kind of feared for the Pac-12's sake. When they get into conference play, they're kind of cannibalizing each other, but Arizona State, I still think is better than what they've showed this year.
I do too.
And UCLA is not as good as what people have ranked them as.
I think of UCLA a lot in the same way I think of Notre Dame. Good enough to beat anybody on any given week, but not enough to where you go, yeah, they're going to beat anybody in any given week. They're close, but they're not quite there yet. I just thought that the pile going for a touchdown was just one of the funniest things I've seen all season. And
it was the number one play on SportsCenter too.
And just the fact that, again, that's why you don't give away points. You hear it like, okay, you get a guy loose. We've seen it in the NFL too, where a guy will get loose and he's going for the end zone, nobody stops and he falls down. And he doesn't score. To me, it's like, I don't care how much time is left. If you can get points, you take the points because you just never know what's going to happen. Same thing with this and UCLA. Just a dumb move. I get the reasoning for it, but nice job by the Sun Devils. They more or less saved their season at this point, and with a big win. And nice job.
Yeah, 3-2. Again, 1-1 in the Pac-12. Definitely not out of the Pac-12 race. I don't think even if ASU were to win the Pac-12, they wouldn't. I don't think they'd make the playoff.
I don't know.
Well, maybe just because of the way the season's shaping up, but still definitely not out of the Pac-12 race. There's still a lot to happen in this conference when it comes to the rest of the conference play. But number 6, Notre Dame goes down. Number 7, UCLA goes down. Number 8, Georgia hosting the number 13, Alabama Crimson Tide. By the way, UCLA fall down to 20 in the rankings after being at number 7.
That might be a little harsh, but okay.
I think that's harsh too.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's a little harsh, yeah.
But number 8, Georgia hosting number 13, Alabama, snapping Alabama's streak of 72 consecutive games in which they were the favored team. Alabama was the underdog in this game for the first time in 72 weeks. It's a pretty big deal. But Alabama was not the underdog in this game.
No.
Georgia was bad. Alabama was good. The death of Alabama, again, not dead yet. It's just so funny. Every time Alabama loses and struggles a little bit, it's pour dirt on the grave. Alabama dynasty's finally over. Nick Saban, what is he going to do? No. Give them a week. Let them go to Georgia where they win all the time against a team that never wins these big games.
No.
Especially under Mark Richt.
We talked about this way back 6 weeks ago in the college football preview with Georgia. They were going to come out, look good, get overrated, and they would lose the minute they had to play someone good. They've done this. I mean, this is like clockwork. You can set your watch by it. Every season, they are not going to win the big games. They never do. They weren't going to beat Alabama, and they didn't. And not only did Alabama win, but they curb stomped them. It was just brutal.
Yep, they beat them up. They beat them up. And Nick Chubb, who was seen as like this Heisman contender running back for Georgia, he was held in check for the majority of the game. In the third quarter, when they're already down by 30 or whatever, he gets a long touchdown run. But outside of that, that's Georgia's only touchdown.
Yeah.
Alabama came in and as you said, curb stomped them. They beat them up. In Alabama, they go from number 13 right back into the top 10 at number 8. Georgia falls from 8 to 19, and things are kind of all right again in the SEC. This is how it works. Well, Alabama's still the class of the conference.
Exactly. And the only team that I think they really even have to fear at this point is probably LSU. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
But
Georgia go ahead.
I think one thing on that, though, you look at how Georgia played where they relied on Nick Chubb, the running back, LSU might need to look out.
Yeah. LSU still has to find a way to throw the football. If they can, because Leonard Fournette is he's just a freaking Abrams tank. I mean, he's going to get you your yards.
Yeah.
But that's all fine and well against Eastern Michigan. That's not going to work against Alabama. You're going to have, I mean, maybe it will, but I wouldn't want to rely on it.
Yeah. But Alabama's still very good. Even, the quarterback play is still a little iffy for me with Alabama. They won this game by running the ball and being more physical, really. And it helps when they get a big day from when there were receivers. The quarterback for Alabama, Jake Coker, only threw for 190 yards. 120 of those were to one guy. So, Alabama's offense is still weird to me, but the defense is still very much an elite defense, I think.
Absolutely, I agree.
We move down to number 9, as we mentioned, LSU. Tight at halftime with Eastern Michigan. I think they were kind of just, I don't know, LSU does this from time to time where they kind of play tight with whoever their opponent is, no matter whether they're good or bad. But they pull away in the second half for a 44-22 win. Leonard Fournette, 26 carries, 233 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's the first SEC running back to have 3 consecutive games of over 200 yards rushing.
Really?
Yeah.
All these years?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I see they wore their purple jerseys. That's a rare sight with LSU. So
yeah,
cool.
I think they do it once a year, and they usually against a team that doesn't matter, like Eastern right.
Michigan.
But again, it's great that they won this game, and Leonard Fournette's a tank. In their 4 games this season, their quarterback has only thrown for over 100 yards once.
See, that kind of stuff works back in the 60s, maybe even in the 70s, maybe even a little bit in the 80s. But these days, you're not going to get by not being able to throw the football. That's my biggest concern with LSU. If they can figure that out, even, again, he doesn't have to be a guy that's going to throw for 300-400 yards a game. He just has to be able to give them the option of throwing the football. And once they've got that figured out, they're going to be very tough.
Yep. LSU moves up to number 7. Number 10 in the country was the Utah Utes. They had a bye week, but because of all the chaos in front of them, they move all the way up to number 5 in the country.
Wow.
And you know what? I'm okay with that.
I am too.
I think Utah's a damn good football team.
I do too. I agree. I don't have a problem with that.
Nope. They get a bye week this week. Next week, they host number 23, Cal. And that's where game day is going this week.
That's going to be a fun game.
Cal scores all the points.
Yes, they do.
They score points. Jared Goff is just going to put up a ton of points, and they have no defense. So you know what? If they were in the Big 12, they'd be like fighting for the conference right now.
Probably, yeah.
We could probably put them. Oh, they're just as good as Baylor or TCU because points. Number 11 was the Florida State Seminoles. Again, winning the games, but not impressive at all. 24-16 over Wake Forest. And again, despite winning, they actually moved down a spot to number 12.
Wake Forest, not a good football team. I mean, they had that one season a few years back where I think they took it all the way to an Orange Bowl berth, maybe, but that's been it. And if you're going to be in the talk for the playoff and the national championship, you've got to do better than beating Wake Forest by 8.
Everett Golson, not any better than he was at his time in Notre Dame, maybe even a little worse at Florida State. The ACC is just not a good football conference right now.
No, not really.
Not at all. Like, that's why I can't take Clemson seriously. Because, yeah, they're going to beat some teams here, but they could also lose to some of these teams very easily, as we said, Clemsoning. But whoever's the ACC champion, unless they're undefeated, they shouldn't be getting a sniff of the playoff.
No, and that's what I think, too, and we can talk about it more as we get into, like, actual rankings and stuff. But I do think, really, this year, with the way things are going right now, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. If a Power 5 conference has a good enough team with 2 losses, they're going to get in over maybe a 1-loss team from the ACC or whatever. We'll have to see as it goes along, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility like it was last year.
No, I definitely agree. Number 14 was the Texas A&M Aggies. Pretty sound victory over number 21 Mississippi State in College Station. A&M moves up to number 9, top 10 team now are the Aggies, and Mississippi State falls back out of the rankings. The SEC West is, again, the better of the 2 divisions in the SEC, and as the season moves along, these teams are all getting good. Alabama's still at the top. LSU is good. A&M is good. Ole Miss is floating around there. Mississippi State can beat you. And unfortunately, Auburn has fallen, somewhere else.
Well, there are 2 teams that people really missed on in the preseason, It's from this conference. People were way high on Auburn, which was just a complete swing and a miss. Mm-hmm. And people weren't that big on Texas A&M. And it's kind of like if reversed, like to A&M is when we should have been all over. Auburn's when we should have left alone.
A&M started off on ranks, and now they're 5-0, 2-0 in the SEC, and number 9 in the country. So good for the Aggies.
Yeah.
Number 15 was the Oklahoma Sooners. They beat West Virginia, number 23, 44-24. Oklahoma is now a top 10 team.
Oh, please.
Oklahoma moves up to number 10, and West Virginia drops back out of the rankings.
Okay.
Oklahoma, it's weird because they have a really – last year they when they succeeded, it was on their running attack. And this year, P. Ryan is the running back. He's not being used hardly at all. And Oklahoma's still finding ways to win. But number 10 in the country,
no, I'm not.
Maybe, I don't even know if they could give Baylor or TCU a fight.
I don't think they could. I don't think they could beat. I think they could beat either one of those teams. I think that Baylor or TCU puts 50 on Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I don't think. I mean, they're okay. If you're Toledo or whoever, you don't want to have to play Oklahoma. But let's be honest about it. They're not the 10th best team in the country. I don't think.
While the top of the Big Ten has struggled, the kind of middleweights of the Big Ten are really starting to show their weight here. Number 16 Northwestern shuts out Minnesota 27-0. Northwestern moves up to number 13 in the country.
Look at the Wildcats doing it with defense too. They beat Stanford this year.
Yeah, they beat Stanford with their defense.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something, I mean, usually with Northwestern, they're another team that would work well in the Big 12. They will score 70 points, but they can't stop anybody. But look at them go. Again, I'm glad Ohio State doesn't play these guys this year.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like to say you're dodging Northwestern, but we're dodging Northwestern. It's as simple as that.
Northwestern has a pretty big game next week against one of your rivals, but we'll get to that in a second. Number 18, as we mentioned, we just mentioned them. I can't skip over the proud USC Trojans. USC had a bye week. They stay at number 17, but they get jumped by the number 18 team, who should have been ahead of them because they beat them already this year. Number 18, Stanford, shows Arizona for what the fraud it really was.
Right.
Beat them up 55-17. Now, Arizona was playing with their backup quarterback, but still.
I don't care.
Stanford, after they lost to Northwestern, we all said, oh, man, we missed on Stanford. We thought they were going to compete for the Pac-12, maybe a playoff spot. But after that one loss to Northwestern, who's turned out to be not a half-bad football team, Stanford's run off 3 wins here. And 3-0 in the Pac-12. They've beaten, a team that we thought was good in Arizona, and they eviscerated them. And now they beat USC already. Stanford's sitting pretty when it comes to the Pac-12 right now, and they're looking like a very solid playoff contender. They should be ranked much higher than 18.
I was just going to say, if you ask me, okay, you say you got to pick one of these two teams as the number 10 team in the country, Stanford or Oklahoma. I'm taking Stanford every single time. Every single time.
I really don't know how they moved up this week to 16, but Stanford's better than that.
Well, that's what I think too, and it was ridiculous they were ranked behind USC after they had beaten USC in SC, for God's sakes. It's just ridiculous.
And it wasn't like a tight win that they won in the last second either. They beat them. They legitimately beat them.
I mean,
and now they're only one spot ahead of them, and maybe it's because USC has the hype machine, and they eviscerated Arizona State the week after, but still.
I'll tell you something else too that's hurting them is that Northwestern loss, because people across the country don't know Northwestern. They think of Northwestern, they go, they beat Stanford. That's got to be a bad loss. They don't realize that Northwestern's 5-0 right now, and it's not a bad team.
They're number 13. They're knocking on the door of the top 10.
I know, and I think, I think in the minds of the voters, they lost to Northwestern, so they can't be that good. Well, as the seasons progressed, we found out that wasn't. Yeah, it was an upset, no question about it, but it wasn't the earth-shaking upset we thought it was at the time. Northwestern's pretty good, and I think that's hurting Stanford right now. But it will play itself out as we go. What they have to hope for is Northwestern doesn't go out and lose a bunch of dumb games here as we go along. But Stanford is definitely better than Oklahoma. That's just a crime that they're ranked the way they are.
Indeed. Number 19 in the country was the Wisconsin Badgers. Now, before the season, when we were kind of looking at their schedule, they played Alabama week 1. Okay, that's a loss, right?
Yeah.
Okay, no big deal. But then the rest of their schedule was soft. They don't have to play Ohio State. They don't have to play Michigan State. They don't have to play any of the other tough teams in the Big Ten. And then they get to their first Big Ten game here against Iowa, and Iowa beats them 10-6. Not exactly a thrilling contest, but Iowa knocks off Wisconsin. Iowa's 5-0, and the same things that we said about Wisconsin before the year in terms of their schedule, this is what Iowa has the rest of the way. Illinois next week. Then they're at Northwestern. That's a hard game.
Right.
Maryland, Indiana, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska.
We liked Iowa as kind of a dark horse last year.
Yeah.
Did we?
And then they lost like their first 4 games. Or
right.
Something like
Did we miss by a year with the Hawkeyes? Is that what's happened here?
Maybe, and I think part of it too is, I mean, their schedule is they played Illinois State, they beat Iowa State pretty well, they beat Pitt by 3 points, they beat North Texas by like 40, and then they outlast Wisconsin here 10-6. Now they're not like a exciting football team.
No,
they're not gonna out offense anybody. I mean, 62 points against North Texas, but North Texas isn't exactly a world beater either.
You beat a college that's known for its jazz band. Way to go. Good job.
Yeah. But, I mean, you look at the schedule, I think they probably lose to Northwestern and maybe even at Indiana.
But you're looking at probably they might be able to get 7-8 win season, maybe even 9 if things go right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're at 5.
Yeah.
And let's see, Illinois, Maryland, Minnesota, Purdue, that's another 4 wins already. That's 9.
Hey.
And then they still got Nebraska, Minnesota, and then maybe they pull out Northwestern or Indiana. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
But hey, Iowa's 5-0. How about that? Go Hawkeyes.
How about that? Yeah, go Hawkeye Steelers. Yeah.
Go Steelers. Number 20, Oklahoma State survives Kansas State 36-34. Again, the Big 12 is not.
Yeah, what's wrong with these guys? That should have been the halftime score in that game.
Yeah. Number 22, though.
That was a defensive struggle in the Big 12. Look at that. Only 36 points. Okay.
Oklahoma State moves down to number 21. Iowa's in the rankings now, by the way, at 22.
Are they?
Yep.
All right, go Hawkeyes. We only missed by 22, a year.
22 last week was the Michigan Wolverines, and for the second week in a row, the Wolverines get a shutout victory, 28-0 over Maryland. Michigan moves up to number 18, and this week they host number 13 Northwestern.
Oh.
In the Big House.
That's going to be an interesting football game.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be really interesting. I can't get over this Wolverines team. When they started out the season, we all thought, well, it's going to take Harbaugh a little while. Now, maybe I don't know what the quality of their competition's been up to this point, but,
Well, I mean, they
beat
had
BYU, which is a pretty good team.
They beat BYU. They had a competitive game against Utah in week 1 that they lost.
Right.
Let's see, who else did they play? Pulling up their schedule right now. They beat Oregon State 35-7. They beat UNLV 35-7. I mean, look at it. Like in their last 4 games, they've allowed 14 points.
Yeah, and they've pitched 2 shutouts in a row, which is hard to do at any level of football. I don't care if you're playing Pop Warner; that's still tough to do.
Yep. And this is kind of like we were talking about with Florida. I think this is a situation where you get Jim Harbaugh is just a damn good football coach.
That's it. Yeah.
He knows how to get guys together and get them towards a goal. And imagine what will happen when Michigan finally gets some talent in there.
Exactly.
How good Jim Harbaugh can make that team.
Well, that's what we're all afraid of around here. We don't want to see that happen, but yeah, it's exactly what's going to happen. But you see, I think what separates the Harbaughs from the Rich Rodriguez types, Harbaugh goes in with a team that he didn't recruit. I mean, maybe he got some of the freshman recruits, but the bulk of the team is not his. Mm-hmm. But he's a good coach in the fact that he knows how to take what he has and make it work. Whereas you take a guy like Rodriguez, or I mean, I'm just using Rich Rodriguez because he was another Michigan coach.
Well, you always hear like he couldn't win because he didn't get his guys.
Right, exactly. And
or he loses the first 2 years because he doesn't have his guys yet.
Exactly. Harbaugh's like, I'll take your guys. I forget who. There was a great saying by an old coach, and I don't remember who said it, but it was like he was so good that he would take his team and beat yours, and then take your team and beat his. That's how good of a coach he is. That's Harbaugh. I mean, he's just that good a coach. Yeah. No,
definitely. And so they get their first really big. I mean, I guess BYU was a big test, but this is their first big test as a ranked team,
right,
as they host Northwestern. And next week, I think there's only one of 2 ranked matchups next week. Next week's not a great college slate, but in 2 weeks they host the Michigan State Spartans.
Oh, that's always a great game, no matter how the talent is on either side. But this year, it's going to be a bloodbath. This year, it's going to be good.
Michigan State better be watching themselves.
I think the Spartans have won the last 3 in that series, so they're due to lose one, and that's going to be a great game. That's going to be incredible.
So moving on down, number 24, Cal outlasts Washington State 34-28. Again, Cal puts up points, but they can't stop anybody. So they struggle a little bit against the Washington schools, but putting up points. They move to number 23, and as we said, go to Utah this week. Only 2 new teams into the rankings this week, Greg. Three teams. You got the Iowa Hawkeyes. Number 24 in the country, Greg.
That's right.
your Toledo Rockets.
Break them up. They've got better looking uniforms this year, and because of that, they're playing better. They're 4-0.
4-0.
Ranked ahead of Boise State.
Number 25 is Boise State. There's your battle for the automatic BCS or New Year's Day Bowl spot.
Oh, God.
Is Toledo or Boise State. But God knows, the thing that sucks is that no matter who wins that game, one of them's going to the Fiesta Bowl.
Especially if it's Boise State.
Is the Fiesta Bowl a semifinal this year? I don't think so.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. They'll add an extra week and put Boise State there just because. That's just the way it works.
So that's your week 5 in the college footballs. Looking forward to week 6. Want to talk some NFL? Move over to the National Football League. We'll start on Thursday night, as we have to, because, tradition. The Ravens and the Steelers. Interesting game. Again, Mike Vick starting for the Steelers. The Steelers looked fine in the first half, but the Ravens made a good push there in the second half, winning in overtime to get their first win of the season, avoid 0-3.
Yeah.
0-3 was bad enough.
Right.
If they had gone 0-4, it was really done. But they stay alive ever so slightly with a 23-20 overtime victory against the Steelers in Pittsburgh.
I was surprised by this. I really thought, even with Mike Vick starting at quarterback, the Steelers at home should have had a little easier time with this game. But then I remember the Ravens always played them tough in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but again, the Steelers also missed field goals of their own. Josh Scobie is gone, I think.
He's unemployed, I think, today, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg was not very happy with Josh Scobie.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he let out a video saying, Josh Scobie, man, he was in Jacksonville and he with us.
I love Snoop.
Tell him how you feel, Snoop.
I love Snoop. I can't help myself. This was one I think the Steelers needed to keep pace with the Bengals.
Without Ben Roethlisberger, are the Steelers in a worse spot than maybe we thought they were?
I'm beginning to maybe think, a little bit, because let's be honest about it. I mean, Mike Vick, is he a better option than a lot of other backup quarterbacks? Yeah, but he's still not the guy from 2004, 2005. Mm-hmm. He still makes kind of dumb plays. I mean, he I think it was a 4th down play where he just did something really stupid with the pass he tried to throw and all that. So who do they have besides Mike Vick? Landry
Jones.
Wow, former
of Oklahoma fame.
Oklahoma, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he also played for the I was going to try to make a Friday Night Lights joke there, but I couldn't come up with it.
Landry?
Yeah. But anyway, no, I think
the Dillon Panthers?
Yeah, the Dillon Panthers. Remember Landry?
Dillon Lions?
Yeah.
Which one?
Lance. The Dillon Panthers, Lance, yeah. Anyway, this was one I think the Steelers needed.
They're at San Diego next week, who is up and down like all hell. But
yeah, we never know what to make of them.
But on the road with Mike Vick at the helm, it's questionable.
Sure.
Then they host the Cardinals, at the Chiefs, host the Bengals, host the Raiders, host the Browns.
If he doesn't play really, really well, they could be out of it before Roethlisberger comes back.
Because Roethlisberger's out, 6 weeks?
Yeah. And they're talking like it might be longer than that even.
So he'll be out against the Chargers, Cardinals, Chiefs, Bengals, Raiders, maybe the Browns.
Right. They could,
and then maybe he comes back at Seattle, which isn't easy.
I think they've got to win, bare minimum, they've got to get 2 of those games. I think they need 3, realistically, to really kind of keep pace with the Bengals. Anything less than that, I think they're done.
Yeah. So the Ravens get their first win the year. The Steelers fall to 2-2. Move over to Sunday, and we start very early in the morning. 6:30 a.m. my time. Sorry, not getting up to watch Jets Dolphins.
It was 9:30 my time, and I didn't get up to watch it either.
Yeah, the Jets, they were up 20-7 at halftime. They make pretty quick work of the Dolphins, 27-14. From all accounts, the Dolphins were pretty listless in this game. There's been calls about, I guess Ryan Tannehill was mad at the practice squad during the week because the practice squad beat them in a practice.
Oh, my God.
And all that led up to Monday morning. As the Dolphins are flying back over the Atlantic, they kick Joe Philbin out of the plane and drop him. Joe Philbin fired as head coach of the Dolphins, the first coach off the board this year.
Floating in the ocean somewhere in the mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, somewhere.
All I can say about this move is it's about time.
Yeah.
I think this is a better football team than they've played. We saw it last year where they were pretty good at times, but Was he the coach when they did Hard Knocks a couple years ago?
Yes.
I think that back then I wasn't sold on him. He just didn't seem like he knew what the hell he was doing.
Well, when he was the quarterbacks coach for the Packers, right?
I don't remember.
He wasn't even a coordinator?
I don't remember, but yeah.
I think he was just a quarterback coach. And when your quarterback that you're coaching are, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers.
Things are pretty easy.
Yeah, well, maybe it's like, well, I made Matt Flynn good that one game, and maybe he's living off of Matt Flynn much the way Flynn's living off Matt Flynn. We all saw this weeks ago, too. Philbin should have just been fired in the offseason.
I think so, too.
They can get a new coach and start the season on the right foot, maybe, but you're 1-3. The Jets are 3-1. The Bills fell to 2-2, so still a little tightness, but you're 1-3, and you're going to try to fight back in what's going to be a clogged AFC?
Well, not to mention the fact that even if they do get up off the mats, they have not shown anything that makes me think they can beat Buffalo, or the Jets for that matter. I mean, they've already shown they can't beat the Jets, and they still got
because they lost to both of them in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and you still got the Patriots to contend with. Mm-hmm. I mean, I get it that if you're going to try to save your season, you're going to fire your coach, and you think that's the problem. Do it as quickly as right. Yeah. And you've got the bye week to make the adjustment and all that, but who knows with the Dolphins? I mean, they're almost as enigmatic as the freaking Chargers are, for that matter.
Did you see Ndamukong Suh's press conference at all either?
No.
It was several next question, and then he got up and left.
I think that was it seemed like it might have been a smart move for the Dolphins at the time, but I'm beginning to think probably not.
I don't even know if I don't think that's the Dolphins' issue. I think that's an Ndamukong Suh issue.
Exactly. I think
it's very clear now he's just an angsty football player. This is his general disposition.
Exactly. I agree completely.
Because even when the Lions were being successful, there was always talk of he's not a team player, or he's angry, or doesn't like the coaching staff, or whatever. I think he's just kind of a cantankerous guy.
Well, there was talk that he was refusing to run the game plan for the defense with the Dolphins.
He was freelancing and just kind of going where he wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something a defensive lineman can do and do effectively.
And then there's another claim that during the game, it looked like he might have, as he was chasing Ryan Fitzpatrick to the sideline, he got tackled. It looked like Ndamukong Suh might have kicked off Fitzpatrick's helmet.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
Exactly.
Anybody else, you might give him the benefit of the doubt. And Ndamukong Suh, you're immediately going, no, he did it on purpose.
Yeah. So, I mean, besides all the Dolphins turmoil, the Jets, they're 3-1.
Yeah.
How about that?
Not playing bad ball. Ryan Fitzmagic doing exactly what we said he needed to do to make this team competitive.
Chris Ivory, 29 carries, 166 yards.
Yeah. Brandon Marshall, 7 for $128. Not bad.
Jets are doing fine.
I don't think they're any serious threat to make a real long playoff run or even make the playoffs for that matter. But if Fitzpatrick can be a game manager, and God, I hate that term, but it really applies here, I think the Jets will be okay.
But I mean, okay, here's the Jets are 3-1. They host the Redskins next week. Then they're at the Patriots. And then they're at the Raiders, host the Jaguars, host the Bills, at the Texans, host the Dolphins.
They've got
the Giants.
They can make a little hay here with that schedule.
They've got a pretty easy schedule because they were what? Were they last place in this division last year?
I'm pretty sure they were. Yeah,
pretty sure they were. So they get a last place schedule. So they get the Jaguars and the Giants and the Titans at the Cowboys. That's when Tony Romo will be back. But they have a pretty, the schedule's looking pretty nice for them. Move on to back here onto the right side of the Atlantic Ocean. We'll start with my Colts. 16-13 win in overtime against Jacksonville. Andrew Luck, much to the chagrin of my fantasy team, because who didn't get the notification about, hey, Andrew Luck's not starting until 2 minutes before freaking kickoff?
I had no idea either. When I turned the game on, I'm like, what the hell? Why is Hasselbeck in there? So they were very tight-lipped about that, I guess.
This was a game the Colts very easily could have lost again. How many times have we said that already? The Jaguars missed several field goals in overtime and in the fourth quarter. And Matt Hasselbeck and the as the Deadspin called it, the senior citizen brigade of the Colts, led the team to a 16-13 win. They didn't lead any of the categories or anything like that. It was just one of those things where they eked out a tight one in overtime.
It was an ugly game. I don't know if you saw any of it. It was not pretty to watch.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where it was just a war of attrition, and finally the Colts managed to put the points on the board to win the game. That's about the best thing I can say about it. Frank Gore, I like that move at the start of the season. I'm not so crazy about it now.
It's the offensive line, man.
I know.
He still has this is the problem for the last couple Colts running backs. Yeah, the Colts running backs haven't been great, but they also haven't had anywhere to go.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, and if you've got a bad offensive line, I don't know that a 32-year-old halfback is your best option, but that's what
Never
they
mind
have.
a 57-year-old quarterback in Matt Hasselbeck.
Yeah, I honestly was surprised that it was Matt Hasselbeck. I thought it was one of the other ones. And I'm like, Matt Hasselbeck? Really? Okay.
Yeah, Matt Hasselbeck.
All
He's
right.
still around. Move on to upstate New York, where the Giants and Bills, this is the thing with some of the games here. Looking at it on paper, you say, well, there's not a whole lot of great matchups. It's some of the results that are really kind of surprising.
This one surprised me the most out of anything that happened this week.
Definitely. The Giants go into Buffalo and play a really damn good football game. They win 24-10. The Giants are now 2-2 and tied at the top of the AFC or NFC East all of a sudden. And we were talking about what teams could maybe take advantage of the Cowboys with the injuries. The Giants, after starting 0-2, have won their last two games, and really the two games they lost were tight games they probably should have won.
Right. I was going to say they lost both of those games just because they gave up leads in the fourth quarter. So they could be 4-0 right now.
Very well could. They played great. But on the other side, the Bills, a lot of penalties. Tyrod Taylor was okay. Carlos Williams was a good rusher, but they tried to make another late push for it, but the Giants came away with this one.
The Bills this is a game. See, we talked about this Bills team too, where they're the kind of team. This is the kind of game they can't lose. They can't go. This is when
exactly.
You need to win this game,
yep.
And this is the problem with a team that's on the cusp like they are. I'm just disappointed. I really thought that. Now, I'm not saying that the Giants are terrible, but this should have been a game the Bills should have won.
Yeah, and again, now the Bills are in third place in the AFC East.
Right,
they're behind the Patriots and the Jets now.
Yeah. And just like we said, when you're looking at a team that's going to be in the 9-7, 10-6 range, you got to get the games that you can get, and this is when they let get away.
Exactly. The Panthers moved to 4-0 on the season with a 37-23 win over the Bucks in Tampa. The Panthers, they're 4-0. The Falcons also moved to 4-0. The NFC South last year, 4-7 was the division leader at one point in the NFC South last year. And now you have two teams from that same division that both start the season 4-0.
All of a sudden, the NFC South is an interesting race, and not for the same reasons it was last year. Now it's because you've got two pretty good teams fighting it out for it.
Dan Quinn's done great things for the Falcons.
Absolutely.
And not just the offense is better, I think almost in turn because the defense has been playing a hell of a lot better. And obviously he was a defensive guy coming over from Seattle, and he's got the team on a right ship going forward. So that's good for the Falcons. I think the Falcons are better than the Panthers.
I do too. At the end of the day, I think so too.
Yeah, I mean the Panthers, they're winning the games, but it's not in any emphatic fashion. If anything, this was their most emphatic win so far.
With the Panthers, I think that of the two teams between the Falcons and the Panthers, the Panthers are probably a little bit better on defense, but the Falcons, I think, are a lot better on offense than the Panthers are. And that's probably going to be the difference as we play this thing out, because that Falcons offense, when it's clicking, man, they can put points on the board fast and furious.
We already mentioned the Giants moving to 2-2, joining them at 2-2 on top of tied in a three-way tie now on top of the NFC East. Washington pulls out a 23-20 win over the Eagles. Probably the most competitive game of the day, back and forth. Kirk Cousins, 31-46, 290.
Actually, Kirk Cousins threw the go-ahead touchdown pass to Pierre Garçon with like 30 seconds left in that one.
Yeah, game-winning drive from behind.
Yeah.
So now you have Washington, the Giants, and we'll talk about the Cowboys that they lost. All tied at 2-2. I think the Cowboys are in the worst shape. Washington, if they can play like they did late on Sunday, they have a shot. But I think it's the Giants that are all of a sudden in the driver's seat in the NFC East.
If the Giants can keep playing consistently like they have been, and they've played pretty well all season, they just had a couple of tough losses. I think you're right.
The Bears, Jay Cutler makes his return, and the Bears get a kind of surprising win over the Raiders, who everybody was high on the Raiders after the last 2 weeks. And the Raiders fall on the road to Chicago 22-20. Your best-looking game of the week, Greg.
No question about it. You've got the best home uniform against the best road uniform. I don't know how it could be anything else. I was surprised. I really thought the Raiders would probably sneak out of there with a win because I don't think the Bears are very good. But with the Raiders, like we talked about, they're a team that's headed in the right direction, but they're probably not at the point yet where you can look at it and go, yeah, they're going to win this game.
Yeah, they're learning.
They're learning as they go, yeah. But Jay Cutler had a nice game for the Bears, and it's nice to see the Bears put one in the win column.
Yep, they're not going to go 0-16, so celebrate, Andy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to go 0-16.
You guys can all step off the ledge in Chicago. They're not going to go 0-16 now.
Okay, I guess that's fine. I don't know if I want to say the most impressive team in the AFC, but they're up there. The Cincinnati Bengals knock off the Chiefs 36-21 in Cincy. The Bengals are 4-0.
Yes,
and
they are.
They look the part.
They do. This is normally a game, I think we even talked about this last week. The normal Bengals, under normal circumstances, they get a 3-0 start, and this is the game that they walk into and lose, and they didn't this time. They had an impressive win, and I think this team's for real this time around. They're going to be in the picture all the way through. And the AFC North is theirs for the taking right now.
Oh, definitely. If they're 4-0, the Steelers fall down to 2-2, and then you got the Ravens and Browns, both 1-3. The Bengals just need to not bangle too hard during the middle of the season here, and they'll run away with a bye, really. Yeah. Because maybe the only other competition for a bye might be the Broncos if they can continue to do what they're doing. But, obviously the South isn't going to produce a first round bye. And if the Broncos falter at all, then there's nobody else in that division that's going to step up. So it's really the Bengals and the Patriots are on the crash course there through 4 weeks here.
It sure looks like it. They look really good right now. They're playing well on both sides of the football. This Kansas City team, I don't know what to think of. I thought they might be pretty good this year. Beginning to think maybe not.
1-3 isn't a death sentence. This was a game that if they wanted to stay with the pack, this is a game they needed to have. We'll stay with a AFC West and an AFC North matchup out here on the West Coast in the afternoon games as the Chargers ever so barely beat the Browns because the Browns did a very Brown thing.
Yep.
Tie game. Looks like we're going to go to overtime. And the Chargers kick the field goal and it goes wide right. But oh no, the Browns went offside. So the Chargers get another shot at it, and of course it goes straight down the middle for the win. Chargers win 30-27. The Browns brown again.
This game couldn't have ended any other way than this. You got two teams you don't know what to make of, and the Chargers had a chance to win it and blew it because they're the Chargers, and that's what they do. But then the Browns, being the Browns, go offsides, and here we are.
Up the coast, the Packers were in Santa Clara taking on the 49ers. I don't think this game was ever in doubt. I think the Packers were definitely in control of this game from start to finish. Kaepernick was terrible. But the Packers win 17-13. Not as many points as I thought they were going to put up, but you were a little skeptical going into the week too. But
they're not as good on the road offensively as they are at home. I mean, most teams aren't because it's just the way it works out, but the Packers are significantly worse on the road on offense than they are at home, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, so the Packers win 17-3. They move to 4-0. 49ers are terrible.
Colin Kaepernick is bad, and the first step they need towards getting better is fixing that problem.
Whatever it is, Colin Kaepernick doesn't have it, and the 49ers don't have it. They're going to be bad for the rest of the year.
For a long time. They're not headed in a good direction, no.
But staying with their NFC West counterparts, another surprising result on Sunday. The Rams go into Arizona and knock off the Cardinals at home 24-22. In their two divisional games so far this year, the Rams have looked pretty good. When they're not playing their own division, they're so not great. It's kind of a weird dynamic, but the Rams go in and play a very good, solid game against the Cardinals. Todd Gurley makes his first real impact here in his rookie year. Only had like 6 rushing yards at halftime. Had like over 100 yards in the fourth quarter for 146 yards on the day, and the Rams pull one out in Arizona.
This Rams team is confusing. I don't know what to make of them. I mean, we know the defense is good. That much we're sure of. Mm-hmm. And they played well enough offensively to beat the Cardinals team at home, which I really thought the Cardinals would have no trouble with this game whatsoever.
I think it shows that the Rams are going to at least cause havoc in this division, if anything, this year. I don't know if they're going to ride that to playoff contention or anything like that, but they're gonna make a mess of it for some teams at some points during the year.
Yeah, and don't forget too, they've already got a win in their pocket over the two supposed good teams in the division, so you never know what they might be able to make out of this. But they're just so wildly inconsistent that I can't get on board with them just yet.
But again, this is also the hallmark of a Jeff Fisher team. They're 500.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. They could alternate wins and losses all year and end up 8-8 and to be like, yep, that's Jeff Fisher.
Honestly, that's probably what they're going to do.
The final late afternoon game, the Broncos, another kind of tight, surprising game. They pull one out late against your irrational confidence Vikings, 23-20.
Of all the 4-0 teams, they're the ones that no one's really talking about. You know, they're not getting much attention. Maybe it's because it's expected. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just expected, and it's Peyton Manning, Broncos 4-0. Okay, ho hum. They're probably gonna win the division, and the only thing that will ever be a story is if the Broncos start losing games or Peyton Manning gets hurt, and then they start losing games.
But I think with that defense, as good as it is, he just has to. He doesn't have to be Peyton Manning of old. He just has to be Peyton Manning that's enough.
Yep. The Sunday night game as the Cowboys took on the Saints in New Orleans. A tight game throughout, probably expected because of all the injuries the Cowboys had. Goes into overtime, and Drew Brees, for his 400th touchdown pass, hits C.J. Spiller for a 80-yard touchdown, 26-20. The Saints beat the Cowboys, and the Cowboys fall to 2-2, and they're in that three-way tie on top of the NFC East.
What does that make the Cowboys now in the Romo-less games? Are they 0-2 now?
0-2.
I thought originally that 4-4 would be the worst they could do, but now I'll have to see how the Giants go going forward here. But right now, I'm thinking they can get by okay with just a couple of wins out of this stretch and still probably be in it. But yeah, I don't know that they want to get. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I'm still not sold entirely on the Giants, but the rest of that division, I think the Cowboys can hang tough if they can just manage to go like 2-6. Over his 8 games. They should be all right.
The Cowboys host the Patriots next week.
Oh, boy.
Coming off a bye.
Oh,
and
wow.
then they're at the Giants. And then they host the Seahawks, host the Eagles, at the Buccaneers.
They could be out of this quick.
The Giants game and the Eagles game, those are the two ones where they have to win if they want to stay in this thing.
I'm just wondering how much longer you go with Weeden. I think you almost got to look at Matt Castle at this point, don't you?
Yeah. We mentioned the Seahawks. Let's talk about them. Monday nights, they hold on. And when I mean hold on against an 0-4 Lions team at home.
Let me ask a question here with this.
13-10.
When are the officials going to finally start making correct calls at the end of games in Seattle?
Yeah, you know what, though? I don't see this one as egregious as some of the other ones.
A rule's a rule.
I know a rule's a rule. But this is kind of like one of those, that's a rule? Is it really?
Well, it's a stupid rule. I mean, no question about it. I'm not going to argue that point. But, and then again, you want to talk about Cleveland doing Cleveland things or Clemson doing Clemson things. How Detroit was this?
Yeah, what was it? Megatron gets the balls, diving into the end zone, gets stripped of the ball at the 1. Ball goes into the end zone, and somebody knocks it out of bounds.
Yeah,
it should have been flagged. You can't intentionally just hit the ball out of bounds. Especially in this case where you're hitting out of bounds so nobody recovers it. Basically, it should have been the Detroit ball at the half-yard line with one more play. But
like I said, it's a dumb rule, but it is a rule, and it was completely missed. And it cost the Detroit Lions a football game, which is bad enough. But worse, it let the Seattle Seahawks win, which I don't like under any circumstances.
Well, the Seahawks they're not at the level they were the last 2 years.
No, their offense
they're just not.
They're off. Well, now, granted, Marshawn Lynch didn't play last night.
Marshawn Lynch didn't play, but the offense as a whole just isn't there. They're obviously a run-first offense, and taking Marshawn out of it hurts, but they're just not right.
Especially, the defense still plays really well. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah, and Cam Chancellor came back, and that's big for them.
Yeah, and he was the one that made the play that knocked the ball out of Johnson's hands, too. So there's that. But, like I said, it was, you talk about Cleveland, you talk about Clemson. This was so Detroit. I felt bad. I'm not even a Lions fan. I'm like, God, that hurts. Yeah. I just can't imagine.
That was also kind of the perfect end to just a bad weekend of NFL football, really.
It really was, yeah.
This week's not that great either. I'm not going to lie. You got a lot of matchups of 1-3 teams. Jags, Bucks, Saints, Eagles, Browns, Ravens. Not a great weekend of football next week. I'm not going to lie.
No.
Anyway, I think that's it. This has been basically a football show. Follow us on all of our platforms, etc., etc., etc. Greg, any final words for the people?
Go Bucks, as always. Go Rockets, and go Packers.
Go Colts. Please protect Andrew Luck with, all that you can. And go Sun Devils. I don't even know who you're playing this week, but beat whoever it is. We'll see you next weekend. Enjoy the football for what it is, and we'll give you some more excitement next week. Basically a football show.
Good evening and welcome, everybody.
I'm Kirk Herbstreit along with Brent Musburger.